Buckle up, everybody, because today we have Brian O'Shea and Naomi Wolf coming in, and our producers are already spinning like tops as Brian O'Shea approached the mic tonight. He is, of course, an intelligence analyst, private investigator. His day in, day out life is consulting. He served 11 years in the military, active duty. He works again, has worked for senior consultant and subject matter expert for two of the U.S. government's top intelligence agencies. And he sees fingerprints all over everything that you might not see. And of course, Naomi has been ringing the alarm for quite some time. She is very kindly coming to us from London, where she is engaged with something that will be very interesting to discuss as well. She is recognized as one of the most influential feminist writers, and yet has been attacked more recently by some of the feminist community. She came from Yale, doctorate at Oxford, written some very important books. Most recently, the Give Me Liberty and the End of America, co-founder and CEO of Daily Clout. We'll be on with both of them right after this. Our laws, as it pertains to substances, are draconian and bizarre. The psychopaths start this way. He was an alcoholic because of social media and pornography, PTSD, love addiction, fentanyl and heroin. Ridiculous. I'm a doctor, for sake. Where the hell do you think I learned that? I'm just saying, you go to treatment before you kill people. I am a clinician. I observe things about these chemicals. Let's just deal with what's real. We used to get these calls on Loveline all the time. Educate adolescents and to prevent and to treat. If you have trouble you can't stop and you want help stop it, I can help. I got a lot to say. I got a lot more to say. Joint and muscle pains are exhausting and frustrating, but I've got a over-the-counter medication I want to introduce you to that provides great relief using the power of, check it out, chili peppers. Capsidin is made with a proprietary formula that contains no non-steroidal anti-inflammatory agents, no opioids, no anesthetic or steroid, nothing, no chance for addiction, no side effects, no chance it's going to interact with other medication you might be taking. Capsidin contains capsaicin, which is the substance in chili peppers that burns your tongue. That gives you that burny feeling. And of course, I've recommended capsaicin creams to patients over the years, but other capsaicin creams burn your skin. That's what makes capsidin so unique. In clinical trials, capsidin has actually been demonstrated not to burn.
I've been using capsidin to relieve my pain in my hands and my wrist from carpal tunnel syndrome and arthritis. The results have been amazing. I use it every day during my show, and I highly recommend it.
Get the pain relief you need from various sources, even backache, sprains, bruises even. Order now at capsidin.com/Drew to get a 15% discount plus free shipping. That is CAPSADYN, capsidin.com/DREW. Susan's using that on a regular basis and raves about it. I got to get it on my shoulders yet. So we are going to have Naomi here in just a second. I'm not sure if she's here yet. Caleb, is she available yet before I bring them both in together?
Yeah, she's in.
Okay, so I can bring them both. But first, let's quickly go through the schedule, if you don't mind, of what's coming up. Just, again, I'm watching you guys on Restream and over at the Rumble Rants as well. And
that means YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, when he says Restream.
Yes, where you guys can get on the Restream and chat, and I see you there. Patrick, Bet David, and Carla Treadway tomorrow, Jamie Metzel on the 18th, Gabriel Shipton, Kyle Kemper, Salty Cracker on June 27th. Or maybe, June 27th, maybe an early show that day, I'm guessing. Andrew Huff, Dr. Christine Stabell Ben. It's a lot, and we got great guests lined up beyond that. Poor Barsh, I just throw one after another to her as I see people that look interesting to me, and she goes after them. So let's welcome our guests today, which are no exception. Our friend Naomi Wolf. Naomi, of course, Dr. Naomi Wolf. She's a PhD and best-selling author, columnist, professor from Yale and Oxford. And then her husband, Brian O'Shea, who's an intelligence analyst and consultant. Guys, welcome to the program. There you are.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having
Naomi,
us.
I am so sorry to keep you up at midnight there, or whatever it is. Brian was sketching for me a little bit about what you are into there. Can you tell us a little bit about it, or is this something you can't speak about?
No, it's totally public. Forgive me, we may have a little bit of a delay on the line. And so if I talk over you. It's not rudeness. It's just technology.
Understood.
It's a pleasure to be talking to you even at this time of night. I'd rather be talking to you and your team in the middle of the night than to anyone else at any other time of day. So,
Listen to her. Remember that one, Susan. Write that down. That's how to schmooze
I
schmooze
love
your
you.
host.
So what I'm here for is really historic. The commentator Mark Stein, who has been a well-respected journalist and columnist for decades, and had a show on GB News Network, in which he invited me on in October of 2022, and I presented the findings of the War Room Daily Clout Pfizer Documents Research Team, with which your audience is familiar, our group of 3,250 doctors and scientists who have issued 104 reports about what's in the Pfizer documents. This appearance was so inflammatory to Ofcom, which is Britain's media regulator. Believe it or not, they have an agency that regulates electronic appearances, TV and video appearances. So Ofcom, which is a government agency, and I was criticizing the people who rolled out these injections, which are governments, right, including Britain's, although I didn't single them out. Ofcom was so upset by this that they sanctioned Mr. Stein, and he lost his show. They went after GB News. GB News decided not to fight, essentially, and they went ahead and trashed Mr. Stein's reputation very aggressively. They also sought to trash my reputation very aggressively. They told the whole world, but certainly all of English-speaking news outlets in Britain and related countries around the world, that I was a conspiracy theorist. And so, to his credit, Mark Stein has sued them. And this was Mark Stein's day in court. It was a court hearing, a judicial review, in which a judge was overseeing Ofcom's decision, hearing the presentation from Mark Stein's lawyers, hearing the presentation from Ofcom's lawyers, and she'll decide whether Ofcom made a mistake. But it was a very dramatic day. It's interesting how few news outlets showed up in Britain, even though this decision radically affects them and what they can say and their freedoms of speech or restrictions on speech, because it's had such a chilling effect, Ofcom's actions, that no one wants to tangle with them in Britain. They've seen what happened to Mark Stein, they've seen what happened to me, and they're just terrified. But it was very dramatic for me because in the middle of the proceedings, I was told that I was allowed to submit a witness statement, which I'd stayed up late the night before to write. They hadn't told me in advance that I could do that. So I briefly, pleaded essentially with the court to allow me to submit it. The judge reviewed it and she finally allowed me to submit it. I've posted it on my Substack, and it's, I think, a blistering defense of Mark Stein, of the Pfizer documents reports, of the importance of the findings, which are being recognized and honored now around the world. Our volunteers have presented to the Brazilian parliament. They're presenting to the president of South Korea. They were being syndicated all over the world. They presented to the Australian parliament twice. They presented to Ron Johnson, a senator, and Tom Massey's staff, a congressman, on and on and on. And so the whole world is realizing, and you broke this story with, among other, independent news sites long ago. So basically the whole world is realizing that these documents, these findings are important and factual and life-saving. And Ofcom alone is standing against parliaments and judges and governing bodies that are all realizing that a terrible mistake has been made. And I'll just end by saying, additionally, in terms of litigation and judicial decisions elsewhere, more and more decisions very recently have gone against both the distributors of this injection and the people like the White House who tried to smear and censor critics of the vaccine, like me and Jay Bhattacharya. And the Supreme Court is deciding that right now, and it's been successful till now. And they are also, AstraZeneca was pulled off the market last month in around the world, but also in Britain, due to thrombotic thrombocytopenia, which we had disclosed 2 years ago, from our findings. So it's an extraordinary situation in which pretty soon everyone will know that Mark was right, and that I was right to bring these facts forward. And Ofcom alone is trying to hold the information stream of Britain hostage, essentially. So that was my statement, and I ended by making some points about the history of censorship law in Britain, which was actually the subject of my doctoral thesis. Censorship doesn't work. State censors whatever they try to do. Ultimately, the truth comes out, and that's been true of the British state and the American state trying to censor information about birth control or information about gay and lesbian relationships, or books like Animal Farm or The Well of Loneliness or Ulysses. Sooner or later, the truth comes out. Censorship doesn't work. So this is an historic decision this judge is going to make, and I hope that she chooses free speech for Britain.
It's interesting that you frame it that way in that historical context, because I'm going to give up a talk up in Canada, and I pulled the old newspaper article of Émile Zola, the J'accuse article, and in there, totally different thing, the Dreyfus affair and whatnot, but in there he goes, the truth is marching. The vérité est en marche. And it's like, and I thought, this is it. And he goes on to say, and you can bury it underground, but the more you bury it underground, the more it comes up and explodes and can destroy things if you're not careful. But it's essentially something that builds energy. And that's so interesting that you're sort of making that same, here we are again, as you said, making the same case. But let's say, I'm curious what their argument was. Let's just say what you presented was inaccurate or false in some way, but it was your opinion, and it was properly researched and presented, and it was an opinion. But let's say it turns out to be incorrect or not as right as you think it is, or something in that order. What is their defense for censoring public discourse?
Right. Well, that is a great question, and as always, you go to the heart of the matter. Unfortunately, Ofcom has been given an insane brief by the British Parliament, in the sense that they have been given a mandate to protect British audiences from harm, right? So what is harm? So Ofcom isn't arguing that what I said is not true. And they made that point, their lawyers made that point again and again, especially after they read my statement with all its citations. They said, what Dr. Wolf is saying may well be true. She could be telling the truth. It could be true. That doesn't matter. And then the judge said, well, why are you calling her a conspiracy theorist if what she's saying is true or could be true? And they replied, conspiracy theories can be true, which of course made everyone in the packed courthouse burst out laughing. But they're not saying, and they don't have to say, that what I said is false. They're simply making the case that it causes harm. So what is harm? Harm is upsetting people. It could mean that they cause that I'm causing harm to the people that I describe as having committed mass murder. And I am literally using that phrase according to the Britannica's definition of mass murder, because there are 1,225 deaths in the Pfizer documents, and in two of our reports, many of the adverse events, including deaths, took place with 48 hours after the injection. Or they could define harm as keeping people from making a decision that would protect their health during a raging pandemic. So then that gets to the question of, are these injections in fact protecting people? And we know now from the Pfizer documents and other research that they never protected people in the first place. Pfizer concluded a month after rollout in November 2020 that the vaccines didn't work to stop COVID. And in fact, COVID is the third most common side effect. So they didn't define harm well, but they don't have to. And they made that case also. Their mandate is so broad. And as I said in my statement, the 1857 censors of the Obscene Publications Act would be astonished at the breadth, the sweeping powers that Ofcom has been given to just censor anything if they say it causes harm. So they didn't define it, but they just kept calling me a conspiracy theorist. And they also, this was hilarious. They said that that Mark Stein's fault was that he allowed me to be authoritative, that I was presented as an authority. And so they're saying, I'm in trouble because I told the truth, or it doesn't matter that I told the truth. And I'm in trouble because I presented authoritatively. And
Good
that
point.
as a result of that, if I had been less authoritative, or he had presented me as
There-
being less authoritative, he wouldn't have had his career
And and
destroyed.
and by the way, every time you presented your data to me, you always start out with, "I'm not a physician, I'm not a scientist, but these people that collect the data are. We have this amazing team that we put together." You always put that in there. Did you forget
It's
to do
there.
that
It's
this
not.
time?
It's
It's
not
all
in
there.
any way.
Yeah.
It's not my
Yeah.
work. A. B.
Yeah.
All of these reports link to the primary Pfizer documents. C. You can download all 104 of them for free from the upper right-hand corner of dailycloud.io. The book is for sale in Britain on Amazon at this moment. It was a top
Hmm.
10 Amazon bestseller. Like, everyone already knows that this is authoritative material. It's been 3 years almost without a legal letter from Pfizer, let alone one stating that we've made any kind of error. The accuracy of these reports is not in doubt. So Ofcom is in a really interesting, historically pathetic situation of fighting a rearguard action against a truth that has already made its way around the world.
But Naomi, for me though, the real story is what this story has been from the beginning. That Dr. Redfield admitted that when they went after COVID, they did not contemplate the consequences of their actions. So these are people who are physicians, who are medical professionals, who do not contemplate the risk reward of their medical, non-pharmacological medical interventions, like lockdowns, like 6 feet. These things had consequences. At the time, I said clearly, we are going to destroy children, particularly 8 to 15-year-olds. No doubt, the mental health consequences, the cognitive consequences have to be profound. And I did not imagine that counties like one I'm in would do it for 2 years. Even I just the degree to which they continued that destructive policy was uncanny. So for me, shouldn't the issue be not the rightness or wrongness or authoritativeness or it really goes to, you can't handle the truth bullshit of the public, and the moral hazard of suppressing discourse. That is a massive moral hazard. That does more harm than any of this. And how come they can't see that?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I get very, very angry when I hear people like Dr. Redfield, issuing that soundbite, because it is a soundbite. I advised a presidential campaign, Bill Clinton's presidential campaign. I advised a Vice President Al Gore. I was the wife of a White House speechwriter. Um, I know how decisions are made in the White House and aligned agencies. It's their job to think about consequences, right? This notion that, oh, we're just a bunch of scientists and we're in love with our formula or our algorithm or our model, and we
Yeah.
just didn't think about what would happen to children if they're locked in their home for a year and a half. That is nonsense. No one who works in government is allowed to make that case to their boss or to the Office of Management and the OMB. Darling, what is that? The Budget Oversight
Office
Committee,
and yeah.
or to Congress. You're not allowed to say we didn't think about the future. Policy is thinking about the future. Policy, by definition, is how will this rollout of an activity or a statute or a mandate, which is a whole new thing, affect the future. It is nonsense. There is no carve out of we're just scientists and we could have thought about what would happen to the American people if we did this to them. That is not how government works.
Well, nor should it be how Ofcom does, given their broad stroke, their broad authority. Broad authority does not mean that it must be wielded. It has to be wielded, with great power comes great responsibility, the so-called Spider-Man problem. But you and I could go on all day about this stuff. So let me get to your husband. You kindly almost tried to bring him in here. We almost got him into the conversation because Brian, you're the one everyone is all jacked up about today. And then Naomi can play chorus on that, which is fear. I think the place I want to start, and this Ofcom thing is not an exception to that, because it helped, by the way they generate fear is with, one of the fundamental ways is censorship and then propaganda, right?
Yeah.
Those are the two the tools that they use to do this. So my question is, and this is for Brian, is there global fear? Is there a attempt to generate global fear? That's my first question. And the corollary to that is, how do you know when you should be afraid, and how do you know when it's sort of like legitimate fear versus indoctrinated fear? How do you know?
3 questions, and let me answer the second one first. Thanks for having me on, darling.
Okay.
Nice to see you. We are a sea apart. So,
do I call one of you sweetheart also? Is that okay? Do I say sweetheart's good or
you
no?
called me sweetheart before the show. I thought that was for good. What happened?
I thought that was just between you and I.
Wait, I was getting coffee. What happened?
Okay, go ahead, Brian.
So the first one, what we always say is, prepare for hope for the best and prepare for the worst. So I would say with all of the different pandemics, whatever we call them these days, I don't know, because they've gone outside of the medical field. You should be always ready for anything that can affect your life, such as gun violence or the flu, something like that. You shouldn't dismiss it entirely, even if they do plan it, because like I always tell people, even if they've manufactured COVID, they still manufactured it. So you still have to, prepare for that. But obviously, you don't want to take advice on preparation from the very people that made you sick or are pointing the gun at you. So that's how I would answer that. Right now, I would say we do need to be afraid of our own government and the international body of international bodies. They've pretty much decided to almost partner with or even hand the reins of power to, such as the WHO and the WTO, the UN, you name it. And the reason why is because this government, this Biden administration, seems dead set on eliminating the sovereignty of the United States from our money to our identity, to our history, to our very gender identity at some points. So I would say, prepare, but also I wouldn't follow their recommendations on locking down or anything. I would say, with no doubt, with no ambiguity, do not comply.
But again, this goes at the heart of my question a little bit. Let's say it's so let's refine that a little bit. So let's say the next pandemic is an Ebola that's airborne somehow and has a 50% fatality rate. You will naturally lock down. You will naturally stay home with that kind of a number out there, with that kind of fatality rate. Is that what you were saying specifically? Like, don't not be appropriately take appropriate precautions when necessary. Don't comply with mandates that seem, particularly those that seem ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, common sense. Like with the last one, when they said fresh air and vitamin C won't help you, and vitamin D won't help you. I'm like, well, that seems odd. Those type of things, or that racism is a public health emergency, and therefore those people can go protest in large groups, but everyone else has to lock down. This is common sense. It just, if it looks stupid, smells stupid, it is stupid. My fear with this particular administration is, and I'm sure people have talked about this, what if it actually is an acute threat? Let's say in the health space. My fear is that, and even for me, I probably won't lock down until I see,
but Brian, I guess what? You'll have me, you'll have your own doctor, you'll have people you can go to, as we have always done through history. You didn't need somebody in Sacramento or in Albany or wherever you are, where you
unless
can go.
They censor you.
Unless they censor. Well, they still can't prevent our communication, but they can make me frightened that I'm going to lose my license if I dare to tell him something. But we can work together as we have always done. So the decentralization is what works and works best. And guess what? You and I can figure out what your risk is and what you should do about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen to that. But I would say this, so they're very, very clever, because you guys had mentioned, propaganda as a tool. What they also use is something called covert influence, and that is the manipulation of the reality you see. So whereas propaganda is the broadcast, the paintbrush, the paint, covert influence is changing the canvas. So for example, all of a sudden you're like, yeah, this is BS. I'm not going to listen to this. But then you see the neighbors are out there and they're doing it. And then you see it's on radio shows and in music and in graffiti. And comedians are talking about it. And it's on the back of soccer players' jerseys. Well, that's all by design. In the COVID pandemic, that was called vaccine confidence activities. What that is that is creating a beat and a rhythm to change the way you view reality. And suddenly, you start doubting your own take on reality. Like, maybe I was wrong. It's almost like an induced Mandela effect that they push. It's a very effective tool.
Well, it's something that I've been really preoccupied with because it's the one thing that I feel like I should study coming out of the pandemic is really the mass delusion that the whole world signed up for it. The whole world. It's just so astonishing to me, and I thought, when it was unfolding, I thought it was the press being the press, trying to attract eyes because they're in their death throes, and here's a chance for them to create a panic and get some eyes on them. I never imagined that government would be involved with that, but for you, that it must just be matter of fact.
I never thought our government would be involved with that sort of thing against us. So I'd seen that sort of thing. I may or may not have, can't confirm or deny, architected those type of things. But those were for things like counterterrorism, like don't join a bad group and kill people. And you use those tactics to keep people from those groups. But when I started seeing a certain pattern.
Is the pattern the one that Mike Benz points out, that white supremacy is the most significant threat to American democracy, and white supremacy is a domestic issue? Therefore, I can turn the intelligence community internally with their terror tactics.
I would say that's part of it, but you don't really need to turn the direction of the intel community. They're going to do what they're told. And it's compartmentalized, so they're not going to see the big picture. There's also no internet in a lot of these agencies. It's air-gapped. You have the intranet in there, but a lot of times it's not that they're unaware of what's happening in the outside world. They just don't feel like they are part of the outside world. And I say this from experience. I've told Naomi many times, it feels like I'm in one of those like air bubbles in like Aquaman, and the rest of the world's underwater, and I'm in here in Clarity Land because I know so much. I never felt like a part of that world. So you're very detached from it. So there's really no emotional attachment to it except for your friends and family and in the neighborhood.
That is a frightening observation. Well, let's do this. We have to hear from the people that support us, and we want to make sure we support them. So we appreciate you guys all listening to this. When we get back, I want to give Naomi a chance to ring in on what you've just said, what it's like to be a family member of someone who lives in the bubble, number one. And then number two, my next question to you, Brian, is the globalist group. Elon Musk has called them just a social club, a place to hang out and feel like you're doing something good. But others have accused them of being a global cabal with real power. Help me understand which they are. And we get back. Naomi Wolf, Brian O'Shea, be right with you. Of course, I'm a fan of the healthy aging supplement True Niagen. I've been taking it almost for a decade myself. This supplement boosts NAD, which your cells need to survive properly metabolically, and it goes down as we age. It does so with a nutrient called nicotinamide riboside, or NR, specifically patented form of NR called Niagen. It's the most efficient and trusted NAD booster. NAD can also play a role in reproductive health. Boosting NAD is recommended with prenatal vitamins for women over 30 looking to start a family. Here's Dr. Amy, also known as the Egg Whisperer, a highly influential specialist in this area.
As NAD levels go down, and it starts going down in our 30s, that's the same age that our egg supply also dwindles. So I'm fighting for every single woman's chance to have a baby, and repleting NAD is one of the greatest tools in my tool chest that I've been using now for almost 6 years.
True Niagen is an amazing NAD booster. You're going to want to add it to your reproductive health arsenal. And of course, it's in our family of Dr. Drew sponsors. Go to drdrew.com/True Niagen for 20% off your order. That is drdrew.com/True Niagen. Enter Dr. Drew at checkout for 20% off. You can spend thousands of dollars and dozens of hours trying to look a few years younger, or you can skip all that and the hassle and go with what works, Genucel Skincare. Genucel is the secret to better skin. Their products are made in the USA using a proprietary technology that combines a naturally effective base with non-GMO ingredients. In fact, you might have witnessed the astonishing effects of Genucel during a recent unplanned moment of our show, when just a little Genucel XV restored my skin within minutes right before your eyes. That is how fast these products work.
I know I'm a snob about the products I use on my face. Everybody knows it. Every time I go to the dermatologist's office, there are just rows and rows of different creams. Retinols, vitamin C cream, under eye cream, night creams.
Scrubs.
And then when I get to the counter, they're overpriced. All kinds of products that you can all find at Genucel.com.
Susan and I love Genucel so much, we've created our own bundle so you can try our favorite anti-wrinkle creams, correcting serums, under-eye treatments. Say goodbye to those fine lines, forehead wrinkles, skin redness, even those dark under-eye bags. Women and men of all skin types, Genucel has got you covered. Order right now at Genucel.com/Drew to save 50%, actually over 50%, and you'll get a free luxury spa box plus free shipping. That is Genucel.com/Drew, GENUCEL.com/DREW. There are 4 distinct and outstanding medical kits from the Wellness Company: a first aid kit, a travel emergency kit. I was very instrumental in developing that one. I love it. A COVID emergency kit, but let's unpack their medical emergency kit, the one that gives you immediate access to treatment for a variety of medical conditions. Here's the kit: pneumonia, upper respiratory infections, skin infections, gastrointestinal infections. You'll have on-hand medication that will even serve as immediate prophylaxis against a sexually transmitted infection, rapid intervention for Lyme and other tick-borne illnesses. Of course, we've added Tamiflu to our kits in case the avian flu should become human-to-human transmissible. Then we know something is up and we want to be ready. And look, we want to be covered for bioterrorism even. And of course, the Nobel Prize-winning antiparasitic ivermectin, and a how-to guide and a virtual consultant. Get access to these prescription meds by going to drdrew.com/TWC to save 15% off. That is $30 off the medical emergency kit. drdrew.com/TWC for 15% off the kit and any of their kits or their supplements. Do it now. drdrew.com/TWC.
And that suggests trouble in a relationship.
Sean, who are you? Like Dr. Drew all of a sudden?
So for those of you that have asked us the question about the expiration date of the medication, the emergency kits, we will have solutions for you very shortly how to keep those up to date. So stand by on that. And I want to mention that my friends at Paleo Valley got us into their products: organic fed, grass-fed, Finnish beef bone broth, made with bones, not with hides. It's more bioavailable protein, collagen, glycine. It's really an important antioxidant that also helps your muscles get energy. We're a big fan of bone broth, let's face it. And we like the chocolate. It comes in vanilla and unflavored as well. The other thing about Paleo Valley's bone broth is that it's air dried, not ultra processed. They would use chemical extraction like the most popular protein powders. Even the plant-based ones do that. That is according to independent lab tests. You know our friends at Paleo Valley. They are so attentive to every little thing. You saw Kaylee Means and Chef Gruel re-emphasizing their appreciation for what they do. Go to drdrew.com/Paleo Valley for 50% off your first order and 20% off when you subscribe, which means you will not run out of that lovely, delicious bone broth and the insanely good organic coffee with functional mushrooms, the grass-fed beef and venison sticks, olive oil, tallow. We cook with the tallow all the time now. It's a great source of food oil.
And the olive oil.
Oh, and the olive oil as well, which we just got in our packet today, a big supply of that. That is drdrew.com/Paleo Valley. We are big fans, obviously. All right, let's bring our friends in, Brian O'Shea and Naomi Wolf. Naomi, we're keeping her up late in London, late at night. Did you have anything to follow on to what Brian and I were just saying, Naomi?
No, I mean, hearing Brian's description, and I don't mean kind of in detail because he can't describe things in that kind of detail, about how thoroughly agencies can, really alter the reality or alter the perception of people, and people think it's entirely organic, right? It has been completely eye-opening to me. and it connects a lot of dots. And the other thing that I've learned, well, I've learned so many things from him, but one of them is when he's described unwitting assets, people who might be moving a culture in a certain direction, and it's good for the agenda of powerful people behind them, even though the unwitting assets don't even realize that they're moving an agenda on a bigger chessboard than their own goals. That's been eye-opening. But I want to echo what he said. Our agencies are supposed to do those things to other countries. They're not supposed to do them to Americans. And in fact, I think that it was illegal until recently to propagandize Americans, right? Just like it was illegal to wiretap Americans. We had all kinds of protections from that kind of manipulation in the United States that are now gone. And people really need to wake up and, repass some legislation to say, no, you can't propagandize us. You can't. You can't surveil us. You can't wiretap us. We need to be Americans again.
And Brian, yeah, I completely agree with you. And Brian, back to what we were talking about, should we be fearful of the globalist elite? And follow on to that, do they have anything to do with the illegal immigrant invasion that appears to be upon us?
I don't fear any people that sit around boardrooms and wear suits. I do fear their fumbling hands, not realizing the powers they're dealing with. For instance, poking that bear that's Russia and nuclear armed. They might think they can negotiate their way out of it when it gets too real. But that's called mirror imaging. It's something we were taught in the intelligence community never to fall into, such as, well, they'll be logical. They won't do that. Well, people think differently, and you have to put yourself in those heads. On another note, to answer the other question, yeah, they're 100% part of the illegal invasion, as we call it, of illegal aliens coming across not only our borders, but the borders of many countries. And with this, it has many, many impacts. For example, it is diluting the American vote. It is bringing down unemployment. The IMF just 3 weeks ago announced almost joyously how they were happy to see that global minimum wage had come down since the start of 2021. And then there's very specific examples. The NGOs involved are making millions of dollars. They're getting paid money through HHS to hand out these cards, these cash cards to bus people around, and they're making a ton of money. Little for them, little for everyone else. And it's sad because I don't blame the illegal aliens that are actually coming here for a better life. I would do it too. But the thing is, they're not even getting plane tickets a lot of times. Our friend Hernando Arce down on the border, because they're supposed to get plane tickets from these NGOs to anywhere in the country. And a lot of times the NGOs will make these illegal aliens wait like 2 weeks, just baking in the sun, and then say, you got to buy another plane ticket. So they'll buy, the illegal aliens will find a way to get someone else to give them a plane ticket. And then the NGOs are refunding them and getting cash for those as well. And there is something called the tent partnership that people should be well aware of. And that is a whole group of companies from Pfizer to Choice Hotel Group. I mean, so many of these big agricultural contingent of companies that have provided the funding and the infrastructure for a lot of these NGOs that popped up, a lot of these new arrival type agencies that you see popping up in cities to help get illegal aliens housing, cars even without a license. And it's called the tent partnership. And it's something everyone should pay attention to, because it's almost like it's being run by a boardroom who has no idea the impact it's having on the ground, or doesn't care. Of course, they have an idea of what's happening on the ground. But so absolutely profit-driven type of deal here.
Why would let me ask Naomi this question. Do you have any sense why corporations would be involved in this way?
Me? I think that there's a war on sovereignty. I mean, I'm echoing Brian in that regard, but I tend to come at it from kind of a cultural perspective. just because of my background and training in culture. And cultures are very, very valuable. And we kind of didn't. It's like you don't know what you've got till it's gone, right? We don't pay attention to culture because it's free and it's all around us. But cultures are incredibly delicate, incredibly precious, and Western cultures are pretty great. I mean, there's a reason people want to come, from countries where women have forced clitoridectomies, or are married at 10, or people are enslaved in various ways. They want to come to the West because we have a whole different set of moral codes and laws that took centuries, if not millennia, to evolve, right? And so the moral codes of the West and the sovereignty of nations of the West provide a bulwark against the plans of the globalists, which are really to create a kind of feudalist parking lot where there's tons of cheap labor and we're all kind of chipped and tracked, and we really just don't have any choice anymore. A handful of people get to run everything, and a handful of people get to have choice and meet and, jet flights and so on. But sovereignty resists that. Faith resists that. Families resist that. National cultures deeply resist that. And so at what has there been war waged over the last 4 years? It's been the things that resist this globalist dilution of identity. You're not allowed to show. Someone just told me yesterday you're not allowed to show the British flag in Britain because it's considered racist and offensive. And in America, kids are being dragged to the principal's office for putting the stars and stripes on their backpacks, or mentioning God in their speeches. I mean, all over the world, but especially in the West, you see these same erasures. And so humans are being used as a weapon with these migrations. I mean, I'm here in London, it's completely unrecognizable from just 5 years before. We went to the Netherlands and it was unrecognizable. And, I'm the daughter of immigrants, granddaughter of immigrants. I obviously believe in, limited, legal, sustainable immigration, and in every country deciding for themselves if and how much immigration they want, right? That's what citizens are supposed to do. But what's clearly visible in Western Europe and North America is that human bodies from all over the world, but especially countries that really don't share our values, right, are being flung at us in order to just take off the map. What is France? What is being French? What is being English? What is being American? What is being Canadian? Because if you dilute all of that, then there's no one to say, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that because that's unconstitutional, or you can't erase our whole history because our history is valuable, because of course Marxists love to erase history and globalists love to erase history. That's how they, start to plant their own flags, essentially. And also there's no unity, right? You've got people from all over the world who don't speak the same language, who've given up trying to speak the same language, at least in in New York. That's how I'm feeling, that these immigrants are very different from many, legal immigrants, or people who work for years to get a green card, who just want to be American, right? Well, same with in Britain, people came who just wanted to be British, and then they became British, no matter where, they'd come from originally. That's a beautiful thing, but that's not what's happening now. And so you're getting these masses of people who really don't care about America or about Britain, right? And can't communicate with one another. And that's a perfect stew for globalists to move in and say, okay, quarantine camps, or, okay, no more flag, no more Shakespeare, no more, family life. We're going to take your kids, we're going to transition them without your knowledge, all the nasty things they want to do.
You mentioned the French. I've had my eye on them. I think I've spoken to you about it because I noticed what they were doing was starting to openly consider, what is it that we are? What does it mean to be French? First they had the youth rebelling against mandates because it was not consistent with the founding principle of liberty in the original republic constitution they had. Yeah. And then secondly, I find them really examining, they're opening the books again and almost all of their history and going, now, wait a minute, maybe this isn't so bad. And maybe do have something to offer. And maybe being French is something we need to really protect. So I've had my eye on them. And then it's no surprise you said that the culture wars generate feelings, even though the culture is fragile. Now you've got Marie Le Pen. Now you've got all these things coming in. And it really is about the culture that they're trying to, that seems to me to be the one line in the sand that really gets people mobilized and united.
Absolutely. And it's such a minefield, right? Because just talking about immigration leaves you open, especially in Europe, to being tarred as a racist. But also in America, the left, our friends on the left, if you dare to say, I'm really concerned about the fact that there are barracks and barracks of people who've entered the country unlawfully that we're giving millions of dollars of the New York City budget to, and kids in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, in our neighborhood in Brooklyn, from lower income families, are not getting decent food to eat. You're a racist, right? You can't say America first, right? You can't be like listening to the pejoratives, nationalist, populist. What's wrong with being patriotic, right? It's been the idea that you love your country has been so tarred as a racist or xenophobic position. But what you say is absolutely correct. I mean, again, it's that negative proof, right? We paid no attention to our cultures until we realized that they're under attack. And then the next organic, important question is, what is it to be American, right? What is it to be French? What are our values? And it turns out that a culture is a social contract, right? It's a set of agreements. And these are real, right? Like, for instance, in the United States, we may not approve, not everyone approves of gay sex, right? There are people who don't, for religious reasons, approve of it. But our social contract is we don't execute people for gay sex like they do in Egypt, for instance, or in Lebanon. So that's an agreement. The agreement that women are equal to men. My gosh, that took centuries. That took generations, more recently, of women fighting for those rights to be equal to men in the law. That's a precious thing. And you get, millions of people from cultures where they just don't believe that women are equal to men. And eventually they'll be in a position to change the law if they want to, so that women won't be equal to men in the United States. That's very scary. So it is time to reflect all over the West. What does it mean to be American? What are our values? What does it mean to be French, and so on? What does it mean to be Irish? And those are not racist things to do. If they're not race-based, they're not racist.
Yeah, right. And it's interesting you mentioned the people coming to countries and assimilating. Susan, I'm thinking about your graduation from college. She was a history major at UCLA. The head of the history department got up and said, the melting pot is a racist concept. There should be many different communities that are separate but equal. There should be no melting pot, and that any movement towards a melting pot was violence. Do you remember that, Susan?
I remember that. I remember so clearly. I grew up with the melting pot metaphor in the 60s and 70s. And that was what we were all supposed to aspire to. It's so beautiful and cozy and yummy. And then all of a sudden and this is what goes back to the point Brian made, that the powers that be are really able to construct cultural beats, right? And repeat them and repeat them. So all of a sudden in the mid 70s into the early 80s, it was racist to celebrate a melting pot. Everyone had to be a salad bowl, was the stupid metaphor, right? Everyone was distinct. And then that evolved into multicultural, like we weren't one culture anymore. We had to have lots of cultures. And then there was the hyphenation. I wrote an essay about this, so it's easy to recreate. African American instead of just American, Asian American instead of American, right? Italian American used to be American, right? And now I went to my Yale 40th reunion, and I literally kind of left early because there were a set of receptions in the afternoon, and it was like the Asian American Society reception, the LGBTQ Society reception, the African American Society reception, the La Casa, Española Society reception. And I'm like, I'm just a Jewish lady who likes freedom. Where do I go?
Like free speech. But be careful
by those identities.
Well, but I don't know. I as long as there's a melting pot, I'm all for people sustaining their culture within that. You know what I mean? You can do both. We've always done that in America.
It's not difficult. That's what America is. But but we're now in a place where for you to even say that is racist or xenophobic. that you
Right.
want a unity, right?
A unity and protection for the individual differences. But Susan, do you remember that lecture? Do you remember in the auditorium?
Yeah, I didn't know what it meant at the time.
You were the history major.
I mean, I knew what it meant, but I didn't know how far it was going to go.
I didn't either. It caught my attention. I thought, oh, this is interesting. This seems like a departure. And here we are.
I had a lot of warning signs in those days.
Yeah, that's right. You brought some home. And that's why.
And then everything was on the back page of the newspaper.
And that's why Susan is so worried about the Chinese government, because she studied a lot of Chinese
and Russia
history.
and Afghanistan and ISIS and all that other stuff.
And let me go back to Brian. So ISIS is back in the discourse again, and it seems like we started this conversation talking about fear. It seems like they are now having a multi-pronged field day, or what should we call it? Is this a salad also, Naomi? A salad bowl of fear-based,
salad of fear.
Propagandistic. Yeah. But some of it, again, the reason I started this conversation with what's legitimate and what isn't, I mean, when a Russian warship and submarine cruises past the coast of Florida and is right up next to an American cruise liner, I mean, this is...
I would be shitting myself.
Not just shitting yourself. Why is it... I mean, if they were using that as a... I mean, they're evoking fear in me, but they don't seem to be making maximal use of it, if that's what it's all about.
Well, I don't think... So I don't think everything is run by the geniuses in the Biden administration. I think they've really pissed Russia off by allowing and targeting Russian ground radars that are there to detect incoming ICBMs. That happened last week. And they're just taking, the Ukrainians supposedly are taking these out with American weapons. Translate that into our advisors, who are actually the operators of that equipment, are most likely taking out those weapons. Also, all of our satellites have been retasked to look at Russia, which is what you do for getting ready to strike someone, to make sure you can see their counter strike coming ahead of time. So the Russian naval maneuvers, I think that's a real thing. I think that's a show of force, because we're kind of at war with Russia. They said last week, we are the enemy. For some reason, Biden's like, hey, yeah, sure, Ukraine, use our weapons to make strikes into Russia, a nuclear power.
Yeah,
it's
just
insanity.
not Moscow. Just not Moscow. Don't go too deep. What is that? It's like, maybe they won't notice.
Head,
what?
Gut, not head, right? So that I think is very real, because they're not pumping it up, because the media is not pumping it up.
Oh, that's interesting. So the ones that they don't amplify are the ones we should focus in on. That's interesting. Okay, that's kind of what I was looking for, what to fear and not fear. But then we have ISIS arrest, and we have all kinds of other things going on. Tell me about those things that they are using.
All right. Well, the ISIS thing, they screwed up. So I made a list this morning, and JJ Carroll and we have a show on Daily Clout called Unrestricted Invasion. And we did the 5 top candidates for the next pandemic. I think it comes at us from multiple vectors. And, my first one, national security, number one, instigate a Russian threat that exists or make it worse than it has to be. Dangerous game with a nuclear power. The other one was make sure a scary Islamic terrorist group comes through the open border, because a couple weeks ago, all the way back to 2021, the rhinos, or the Republicans in name only, and the Democrats and the legacy media, they didn't seem to care about anything happening at the border. As a matter of fact, they were saying there was no border crisis and that there was no open border. Then all of a sudden, this week, right after Trump got charged for things that we are not sure what they are. They're certainly not crimes. But right after that happened, they ramp up all of this fear. And the scary Islamic terrorist group, see, that's where they screwed up. They chose ISIS-K. Now, you may recall ISIS-K from August 2021, when they call it the fall of Kabul. What it is the guy who falls gave them Kabul. That being Biden. And all of a sudden, there was this ISIS-K thing that this sweeping through Afghanistan. And you may recall, Dr. Drew and Naomi, they were actually trying to get us to cheer for Taliban at that time. It fell flat, but they were like, hey, the Taliban's the only thing holding them back. Well, ISIS-K is kind of like it's not really much of a thing. It was a splinter group of 50 Al-Qaeda veterans who moved into Syria in like 2014. And then all of a sudden, there's this massive army sweeping through all of Afghanistan. So it's based off something called the Khorasan Group. So now all of a sudden, they're like, hey, it's ISIS-K. Remember those guys that took down Afghanistan? Well, now they're here. Now, you may recall 2 months ago, the Biden administration also blamed ISIS-K on those Russian terror attacks that happened at that theater. Within hours, Biden was out there saying, it's ISIS-K. So ISIS-K is the ultimate straw man. But it's kind of a ridiculous one because it doesn't take much research to see that this administration has even changed the history of ISIS-K and the name. It was Khorasan Group, then it was ISK, then it was ISIS-K. Now, the last two names came in 2021, just in time for Kabul to be handed over to the Taliban. And now they're saying they're here. They're saying they attacked the Russians. So you see where they've kind of prepped this whole fear thing. And just to make sure Americans are extra scared of Islamic extremism, maybe I'm throwing a wild spitball here, but why not have extra violent pro-Hamas protests all over the country at once that are terrifying to people that aren't around or involved with them? So it's almost like audience prep to get ready to be terrified of Islamic terrorists.
It seems so counterintuitive. It seems like I know what the feelings I have is the opposite. It's like we need somebody in here we need some adults in charge of our government to sort of take care of business. How do they expect this to work in their direction?
Well, the way they expect it to work in their direction is they're giving themselves multiple reasons to shut down the election. And that's how I feel. Like this is truly, and there is a hierarchy of greed, I would call it. So at the political level, their goal is the election. Okay. Then at the globalist level, their goal is a global governance. That's where the borders go, and also rule by bureaucracy at the INT, the .int or international level. That's what the WHO treaty is, the international health regulations, all based on One Health. And then above that, I always say, and a lot of people, they're like, no, that's not true, is the communist plan, which has been going on since the 20s to
Here you go, Susan.
Turn the world communist. And that's so as the politicians are doing their thing and saying, yeah, we're going to win because of this, there's people pushing them. There's an invisible hand pushing them. That'd be the globalists saying, yeah, that's a good idea because that direction is meeting their needs at the globalist level. Then as the globalists are doing their thing, then there's the invisible hands of the Chinese Communist Party saying, that's a great idea, keep going it, because it's serving the ends, but it's kind of rolling uphill. And the ultimate goal for the Chinese is the China Rejuvenation 2049, where China has stated they will be the global hegemon.
And to pile on what Naomi said about what Lenin called the useful idiots, I think you had unwitting assets, I think is what she called them. Everybody is the unwitting ass. Oh, Susan wants to talk. She's stirred up by what you said.
No, you go.
Well, I was going to have Naomi pile on a little bit that everybody becomes the unwitting asset of the Chinese Communist Party. Really, as you said, there's a hierarchy of power greed, and the fact is, the top is the communist agenda, particularly the Chinese communist agenda, and we all become one way or another useful idiots for them.
Yeah, I'm thoroughly persuaded by Brian's analysis. I mean, I sort of traced something parallel in my book, The Bodies of Others. Who's the they, right? And so I'm thoroughly convinced that it's these kind of NGOs at the top, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, but they're aligned with China. And China is ultimately, I'm persuaded by Brian, waiting to checkmate all of them ultimately, and all of us. And you can see the elite capture. I mean, I keep going back to my Yale reunion, but that's partly because it was like an x-ray of how our country's being taken over in some ways. There was a discussion about China on one of the panels, and one of the speakers made fun of MAGA and right-wing people who see a threat of an invasion of our country through the border via immigration that serves as an act of war by China, or a way for China to infiltrate the United States. And everyone burst out laughing. And, when the elites burst out laughing, it means that they are in bed in some way, or their interests are in bed in some way with the people who may be being dislodged if enough Americans said, wait a minute, maybe China, maybe we are vulnerable to China. I mean, I'm thoroughly persuaded. My husband has a very capacious brain. And so what kind of can't be fit into short bursts on this show, perhaps, is when he says, look, China has encircled the ports. They've bought up all the port land around San Diego. Here's Seattle that they've bought up. Here's the farmland that they've bought up. They bought up the water supplies of the Great Lakes, and he goes on and on and on. They bought up cigarette manufacturing. They bought up the Smithfield pork manufacturing. And I sit in the car with him, and he's like, oh, and he'll just say, oh, well, Smith, they engineered the pork to put 4 times the protein into it. And then there's a lesser version of pork that has less protein. So, of course, they're sending the high quality protein pork to the People's Liberation Army soldiers, and Americans get the low quality pork with less protein. So they're engineering, as he points out, this reversal of the big, strong soldiers will be Chinese and the weak, hapless, pathetic soldiers will be our own. So this narrative over the course of now 2.5 years really adds up to an incredibly persuasive picture that that we are, being undermined, taken over, invaded, and that there are indeed these layers of greed, and these entities don't always work in alignment, and some of them don't share the same agenda with others. I don't think the World Economic Forum is Marxist, but I think there's a new kind of globalist oligarchical Marxism that is a nasty blend of all of these tyrannical impulses. And I think for sure, all these people have learned from Marxism, right? Like when you see the erasure of history, it's a learning from the Marxist playbook. When you see demoralization, subversion.
And Naomi, I wanted to add to that too. There is some Western hubris, I think, and some ignorance of China that they also laugh because they don't know. They think they know, but they don't know. And they know China's bad, but they've never really researched China in depth. And also there is that kind of hubris. We kind of saw that with Biden's "we'll eat their lunch" speech, where people really do, they see that China is a developing nation technically at the WTO, at the World Trade Organization. And I've heard our friends who research a lot of the same stuff, but they're focused on the World Economic Forum. They're like, oh, China's just a junior partner. It's like, if you knew anything about China, you would know, globalists, that they don't share a table with anyone. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Well, wait, hold on a second. No, Susan, I know, wants to jump in on this because this is her. No,
I agree with him 100%.
Yeah, this is her thing. She's been saying this for a long time. So go ahead, Naomi. I'm sorry.
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, we're in a steep learning curve as a nation because, and again, this is a point Brian made long ago. And I'm persuaded by it. We're not used to wars being fought like this, so we don't recognize it, right? We're used to wars being fought with, an attack on Pearl Harbor, or an invasion by the Redcoats, or the Twin Towers exploding. I mean, and we're also very unused to war, right? We've been a very blessed country. And I think, interestingly, that's why Brian and I and people like Laura Logan are so freaked out, because, I as a journalist, Brian as a veteran, and Laura Logan as a journalist have been in war zones. And so we're like, this is war. We see that this is war. This is how people behave in war. This is how resources are, consolidated in war. This is the nature of rights and civil protections being stripped away in war. And people who just are not used to war, like, my suburb is fine. Everything's fine. The same stuff is on TV or Netflix. Everything's fine. I don't know what you're talking about. But just to wrap up this thought that we're on a steep learning curve, because it's not a traditional war, because it's what Brian has explained to me often, unrestricted warfare, which is you tenderize the enemy, you wear the enemy down kind of surreptitiously before the enemy even knows what's happening, and then you don't even need to fire a shot, right? That's a real victory from a Chinese martial playbook of many centuries, I gather. As a result of the unusualness of that to us, they're making quite a lot of progress without our seeing at all what's going on.
You know, I'm beginning to see a lot of. I'm sort of constructing little models in my head of various psychological phenomenon that are in excess that are creating some of the present problem. But hubris is definitely one of them, and the lack of humility, which is everywhere. This irrational certitude, as Joseph Fryman said, whether it's in science or whether it's the government, it's just wild to me. Humility should be our constant posture. Rational uncertainty is the nature of reality. And when I see the laughter, it reminds me of the Germans laughing at Trump when he said that they're going to be dependent on that pipeline from the Russians. They're yeah, I'm sure, Mr. Trump, you idiot. And that kind of hubris, yeah, that is it's again, I'm disgusted by it. So what do we do? What is the order of the day? Yeah, who wants to go first?
Darling, I think you should go first because you're good at solutions.
Well, okay, I'll say this right away. I mean, I said the do not comply, but Americans, regardless of your political leanings, but let's just say everyone who's not the Marxist type Democrats that I don't even recognize anymore, you have to make geopolitics part of your routine. See, the reason why the Marxists have made such great strides is they've been at this for a long time. Like we've got 20, 30, 40 years to catch up on, and they do it every single day. And they think about it all the time. One thing I cannot stand when I talk to some, I guess I've always been center, but I guess I'm a conservative now because I don't agree with the other side. One thing that drives me crazy about my fellow conservatives or MAGA or anything is there's so many people that will tell me, "Oh, I don't get into politics." It's like, well, you better get into it because it's in your home and your food and your pets and your religion. And so what I tell people is like, you get home from work, okay, you need to start working on blocking that special use permit, finding a way to get involved in local government, and taking this thing by the reins and managing it. Think of the government like, and the laws and this, our legislative bodies as consultants. You wouldn't hire a consultant and then just say, "I never met you, but I trust you. I'll talk to you in 4 years." No, you're on them all the time because they will do a good job if they, you are on them constantly. And every American needs to start treating their politicians right down to the school board level as hired consultants, because guess what? That's what they are, and they have deliverables, and they better meet them.
For the customer, which is the people. Naomi?
Exactly.
Yeah, I totally agree with Brian. And in fact, that's really a striking difference right now between the United States and Europe. In the US, I think a lot of people are in a very awakened process of figuring out how the mechanisms work. How do I get on the school board? How is zoning rolled out in my community? Like Bill Cam on our site. What is state legislation? How can I change it? How can I amend it? Who do I call to change a bill? How do I lobby? These are so important. How do we come up with solutions to defund bad ideas or to fund good ideas? And when people understand the mechanisms, and there are still quite a lot of entry points in our beautiful system, it's just the powers that be want us not to know about them, then it really does do what Brian's describing. It puts a wrench in the gears of the plans that the bad guys have. Or even good guys who just get corrupted or lazy or follow the money because no one's watching otherwise, right? So that is so, so, so important. Another thing I think is very important is independent media, and that includes every citizen watching. Now with social media, anyone can be a journalist. So document. If there's something weird going on in your neighborhood, take a photograph of it, find out who's doing it, share it, upload it, share it. Ideally, put your name on it. It's not a good time to be shy and risk averse, right? We have to be out front so that everybody in government knows that there will be a scrutiny from all sides all the time. And the other thing I always say at this point, and Brian again has really taught me about this, is we do need to secure our bodies and our families, and especially women and children who always are hurt the worst when there's instability. And I can't say this enough. Some people are like, yeah, war, civil war, whatever. Guys, you have no idea. Women and children suffer most. Wars are no fun. Civil instability, militias are no fun. The rule of law is the best thing, and an advanced civil society is such a precious thing. So while we support the police and support our troops, we need to also learn how to shoot ourselves, which I'm in the process of doing. We need to get firearms. We need to get ammunition. I used to not think I liked guns, but now I'm a Second Amendment absolutist, because you can't have any of the other amendments without the Second Amendment, as it turns out.
You're welcome. You're welcome, world.
Thank you, Robin. And we also need to secure our food supply. As Brian said, they're going after the food supply in all kinds of creepy ways. And so literally joining a CSA, making friends with a farmer, taking trips to the country to buy meat directly from the source, buy vegetables directly from the source. If you don't live near a farm, it's very, very, very important. And securing water, securing clean water, and forming informal groups. Literally, I always use the example of neighbors having a potluck. It may seem artificial at first because we haven't done it for a century, but our grandparents and great grandparents knew all the time how powerful inviting neighbors over for a potluck was, or a church social, because in one room of 40 people, you're going to have all the skill sets you need if you build those relationships. If there's a disaster, when there's a disaster.
Can I tell a quick story about that involving Naomi?
Of course.
What I am very impressed with this one, when I met her, I was actually her bodyguard. She'd hired me to get rid of some death threats, some stalkers, that sort of thing. It's published, it's well known, but I'll never forget, like, one of the first things I saw her do was question like big oil at like a premiere of something. And then later on, when it was, I think, Cuomo that said no more than 6 people in the gathering, Naomi's first thing she did was she started calling people, and we had a potluck that had about 20 cars up and down the driveway. And, I thought that was great. And we even had the police called on us, and I happened to be outside, and he's like, do you have more than 6 people here? And he didn't want to be there. And I said, as I'm showing him my license that says veteran on it, because I know that's a good thing. I said, no, 20 cars, but I don't see 20 people. And he was like, good enough for me. So I really like that. Yeah, from the get-go, she's always been like, oh, let's double down.
Well, that's a great,
Radical.
thank you, darling. That's a great thing to add. I mean, none of these bad plans can roll out if people just don't comply. Just don't comply. Just like flagrantly don't comply. And there again, we're way ahead in the United States, because people are starting to just not comply. They're much more subdued in Britain because they don't have guns, and now they also don't have a free press. But I think that's a beautiful story. Thank you, darling, because imagine if in the middle of lockdowns, everyone had just said, no, no, we have the right to assemble freely. It's in our Constitution. We're just going to assemble freely.
Yeah.
We
have a history of resistance. We have a history of it, of resisting and pushing back. But I never thought about the radical engagement around the potluck. That's a little bit off the usual target of radical extremism. But I get the point.
I mean, because at the potluck,
right.
you have the guy who knows how to do the electricity, and you'll have the woman who knows where a good water source is, and you'll have the teenagers who can watch the kids to free everyone up to shoot, or, you'll have a,
well, just look, and you have just building relationships, even amongst people who don't have specific skill sets, just having, the ability to support one another, physically, emotionally, whatever it might be. That's you're making a great point that way.
And
well, you guys
gotta shoot though.
Oh, sorry.
What's that?
Got to wrap it up. All right.
Yeah, we don't have to. Go ahead. Finish what you're saying.
Okay. Well, no, I mean, leaping up some levels from the potluck idea, look at what we've done as dissidents with a virtual potluck. I mean, with 6 phone calls, 10 people stopped the World Health Organization, by a phone tree, basically, in calling out their own followers and, tasking each other, the Sovereignty Coalition, Frank Gaffney's thing that you're part of, darling, and our friend Josh Stelman is part of. They literally did so much to stop the plans of one of the most powerful organizations in the world that thought they had it all stitched up. So I guess what I'm saying is the potluck model can be escalated to see the kind of amazing history of the last, few months, especially in which a handful of people who said no created an alternative medical network, an alternative media network, alternative legal network. None of these things existed 3 years ago. So that's a meta potluck.
You're right. Yeah, no, you're right.
I have to say we haven't stopped them. Oh, sorry.
Continuing the World Health Organization, please
we
finish it.
slowed them down. Yeah.
Slowed them down.
We won a battle. But there's a lot of work to do because they started navigating around that immediately. They already planned a consortium of dairy producers and how One Health can help them. So, Naomi, I just had to jump in there because for Frank's sake.
That's fine, sweetheart. But I will now jump in to you and say you have taught me that part of winning a war is tiring out the enemy. So you've slowed them down, but you also force them to burn resources, which you said is part of winning a war.
That's right. Close the ROI.
And then now, Caleb threw up there the 3 steps to overthrow a free society. Is that something that Brian gave us? How to capture a free country in 3 steps. Antagonize the free people, depriving them of their rights, thwart their reproduction through artificial interventions, overwrite their generations of epigenetic memory by cultivating a new slave class that has never known liberty. This sounds like Naomi.
That's intense. No, I wrote a book that had 10 steps to fascism, but I've never seen those 3 steps. I think they boil.
I wrote that, but I wrote that based off of all the topics from today that I condensed it into a paragraph there of what it seemed like we were talking about.
Wow, interesting.
That's fast.
We barely touch on the reproductive stuff, but I know Naomi has been beating that drum for a while. And now all of a sudden, where are all the babies? What's going on? I don't understand. What's happening? Yeah, no kidding.
It seems like if you add up all of the actions, like it seems like this list of 3 is their big plan. It's like you just have to constantly antagonize people so that we're always distracted and stressed by something else because they're depriving us of our rights methodically. Yeah. Then you slow down the reproduction of people who know freedom and who understand what liberty is and who have generations of people before us who understand what that is. And then you start importing in people who don't understand and who have no past. They have no epigenetic memory of what liberty and freedom is. And you start, it's not like it's just to basically overwhelm people who understand freedom with ideas that don't.
Naomi called it a feudalist parking lot. I wrote it down because feudalism, it's really the Jacobins all over again. Feudalism, Louis XIV, Jacobins, today. That's where we found ourselves. Naomi, you're trying to jump in here.
No, I just want to really compliment Caleb because this is a super smart identification of 3 points that are so relevant now that really can collapse societies. And I think you should I think you should expand it into an essay and a book, of course.
Oh, thank you. Part of it's based off of stuff Emily Barsh also wrote. So I condensed, it's like a team effort with that.
Barsh. Also, you've got an amazing team. It's good.
Well, guys, I'm feeling very guilty keeping Naomi up so late at night. Sorry. I know she's probably got another big day tomorrow. And no, sorry. I mean, we have been dazzled by this a little bit, and it's been very interesting. You guys, as always, exceed expectation. Is there, other than checking out dailyclout.io, are there last things to say? We're going to give Brian a chance, and then last promotional areas you want people to go to. Brian first, then Naomi.
Oh, okay. Well, please go to my Substack at Substack Brian O'Shea, however the URL is set up. Sorry. And also, we do have a weekly video program, or whatever we're calling them, called Unrestricted Invasion, hosted with me and JJ Carroll. He's an author and a 24-year border veteran. And this is under the magnificent Daily Clout platform, which my wife owns and runs. And follow me on X. I'm putting out a lot of stuff, and that is at Brian O'Shea SPI. And apparently you should follow Caleb as well, because he has some good ideas. So, but yeah, check it all out.
And Emily.
We are definitely looking. Naomi mentioned it earlier. Take pictures, send them in. Every town really is a border town. And so the more we can expose which hotels are being kept at, I mean, don't break the law, but what we found is they're being secretive about this illegal invasion for a reason. So the more we expose and we start telling, especially, some of the neighborhoods I've run into, that, hey, did you know that this Comfort Inn in Danvers on Route 1 is completely full of illegal aliens, and they're right near all these schools in your neighborhood, and they're not vetted. Okay. And so the more we can expose that costs some money to relocate the NGOs, and it narrows the return on investment. If we raise their expenses because we're straining their logistics, that is a war of attrition, and that definitely turns the dial. Slowly, but it turns it.
And Naomi?
Well, please support dailyclout.io, doing such important life-saving work. You can also support my Substack, Outspoken. I really do need everyone's help, because we have gigantic legal bills for our lawsuits against the White House and against Pfizer, and also to promote our draft bill to ensure election integrity. But lastly, I just want to say, especially viewers in Britain, or if you know people in Britain, it's a very important time to support Mark Stein. He's on Twitter, X, at Mark Stein Online. And if you're in Britain and you're a British citizen, write to Ofcom and let them know whether you think you should be able to hear multiple points of view or not, and have a free information stream and a living culture. I think it's a really critical time to support our targeted dissidents and other targeted dissidents like Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro and President Trump. We have to rally around the targeted dissidents because all those others could be you or me tomorrow.
So odd that we live in that world. I was flashing back on the first time I met you when you were on HLN, and you were, I think the book was Vagina or something. Was that the name of that book back then? And we were talking about male-female issues, if you had told me at the end of that interview, hey Drew, in 12 years, you and I are going to be worrying about freedoms and ability to speak our mind, I would have thought, what are you talking about? But there we are. The Facing the Beast is the current book. What's that, Naomi?
No, I just wanted to say, when I said, support our dissidents, including President Trump, that's not an endorsement. I cannot endorse because I'm nonpartisan. It's just saying no opposition should be targeted. That's the definition of a banana republic. Yeah.
Guys, thank you so much as always. Let's get together. We'll be out in New York City in July. Let us get together then, please.
Absolutely. That will be so much fun.
Absolutely. That sounds great. All right. We'll do some shooting.
All right, you guys. Take care. Yeah. Well,
yeah.
Susan's, we're up for it these days, astonishingly so. Susan has been taken shooting by Emily Barsh.
Yeah, I learned how to do an AK-47. I'm so excited.
Okay, well,
oh wow.
Or it was an AR. I don't know. I can't remember.
And next she's gonna tweet us what text.
Apparently, I have really good aim. So.
And I guess we're gonna have equipment. I guess, but Emily's gonna have to help us with that. But anyway, that was very, very interesting as always. Those two are just makes you think, and that's really what we're trying to do here. Thank you, Caleb. Thank you, Emily
I can't
Barsh.
ever step in the middle of those conversations, because as much as I think I know or whatever, or I suspect, everything for me is more intuition at this point than
Well,
actual information.
Because I'm so moderate, I'm always trying to figure out what's real, what's Memorex, what should I be really afraid of. Is your camera on? I see your still picture here. We should be able to see a real picture of. Do you have Susan's camera, Caleb?
Wait,
I don't hear your. I don't hear your microphone either, Susan. That doesn't seem to be on either.
There she is. Uh-oh.
There you are. There
she's
you are.
super zoom.
Okay. You've replaced me now. We got two Susans up there on the screen.
Uh-oh.
Oh, I'm not on. Okay. I feel like they have all the information. I'm just like, talk about this, talk about that. I want to know what's going on because I don't know what's going on. I don't study, international affairs right now. I just get what I get off the news like everybody else. But we have to be aware of what's going on in the world on a regular basis beyond just what you see on your iPhone, and dig deep because these guys seem to know what's going on. And I don't know. I just really appreciate their help.
I was taken by his description of if you're in that intelligence world, you end up being in a bubble detached from reality and looking at your narrow little area that you're trying to influence. That's really, really interesting. That adds to my understanding of some of what's going on here. And then this idea of hubris versus humility and how we're in this crisis of hubris and the unwitting assets that are moved along as a result. And then feudal parking lot. I walked away with that new concept, which I like. And then Caleb's 3 insights onto how people are coming at us. It's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Very, very well done.
All right. We are
in between changing diapers. This man
exactly.
is
Speaking of that,
intellectual.
We've gone way over time. We got to give him a chance to go do exactly that. Let's see. This is Wednesday. We'll be in tomorrow, as we said. There we are. Let me get you a little information on what's coming your way. Don't have it.
It's Patrick Bet David tomorrow from PBD podcast. They're really big show. And Carla Treadway's coming in tomorrow.
And Carla, she lost her business due to lockdowns in Ontario, Canada. We're going up there to try to save Canada a little bit, so that will be interesting. So hopefully she can sort of grease the wheel on that one for us. And Patrick is a founder of Valuetainment, a Yankees minority owner, author of Your Next 5 Moves, Master the Art of Business Strategy, and the host of the PBD podcast on Rumble, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple. So there we go. And we will see you all tomorrow at 3:00. Ask Dr. Drew is produced by Caleb Nation and Susan Pinsky. As a reminder, the discussions here are not a substitute for medical care, diagnosis, or treatment. This show is intended for educational and informational purposes only. I am a licensed physician, but I am not a replacement for your personal doctor, and I am not practicing medicine here. Always remember that our understanding of medicine and science is constantly evolving. Though my opinion is based on the information that is available to me today, some of the contents of this show could be outdated in the future. Be sure to check with trusted resources in case any of the information has been updated since this was published. If you or someone you know is in immediate danger, don't call me, call 911. If you're feeling hopeless or suicidal, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 800-273-8255. You can find more of my recommended organizations and helpful resources at drdrew.com/help. Everyone, I'm excited to announce that I will be moderating a panel discussion at a premiere of Recovering America. It's a documentary film about the addiction crisis. It's produced by Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s campaign. The screening will be in Albuquerque, New Mexico on June 15th. I'll be joined by Bobby himself, as well as the filmmakers and others to discuss the epidemic that is claiming over 100,000 lives per year in the U.S. Almost everyone in this country is affected in some way by addiction, and I'm going to discover what Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s plan is to address this crisis. Be there.